Some of you might remember earlier this year, Tony and I did a trial seen through glass / behind the glass driving tour. We took 10 paying guests to Portugal for a week of epic driving roads, incredible scenery and beautiful hotels. It came off the back of 10 years of me doing big road trips here on this channel and 7 or 8 years of Tony and I talking about the adventures we've been on our podcast Behind the Glass. We sort of decided that it would be so much fun to bring some of you along on those trips. And I've got to be honest, that first trial was such a success, we thought, heck, we need to do lots more of these. Before we make this an official thing, a new business venture, we should probably trial a completely different format, just to see, well, where we're at our best and what the market demands. So we decided to do a second trial, but this time we're going to go big and take 50 guests through Europe. Less of the kind of epic back road driving and more of the destinations and celebrating the camaraderie, the bonds that form when you're on the road together. Our plan was to leave the UK and spend 3 or 4 days exploring mainland Europe, visiting some of the most iconic bucket list petrolhead destinations around. That would include Spa-Francorchamps, the Nürburgring, the unrestricted sections of the Autobahn, Motor World, the Porsche Museum, the Black Forest in Bavaria, before finally making it into Austria and summiting the Grossglockner, one of my favourite mountain roads in all of Europe. So after months of planning, many Excel spreadsheets and a few sleepless nights, early on a Tuesday morning we headed down to the ferry port in Dover to kickstart our second driving tour. One of the big benefits of taking the ferry to cross the channel rather than using the Eurotunnel is we could get most of the group together. It was our first chance to lay eyes on the people that were mad enough to spend money to come on the tour with us. But over and above that, we could also check out all the cars. Obviously, I knew the cars that were going to be taking part in this adventure, but seeing them written down on a piece of paper is a little bit different to seeing them in the flesh. When Tony and I first came up with this kind of alternative version of a tour, we kind of assumed most people would come in hot hatches, maybe M2s and GT4s, but no, still, everyone turned up in supercars. We had a lot of Porsches, that's to be expected with anything seen through glass or behind the glass, so lots of 992 GT3s, a Carrera T, Turbo S's, etc. We had some Ferraris, an F8 Spider, an FF. There were some hot hatches, a Golf TCR, an RS200 Clio, a couple of F-types, the list goes on. It was a good and varied group. And even better than that, it wasn't all of the cars, because we had a few international participants in this tour. A few from Europe, one bringing a GT2 RS, the other in a BMW 220i. We also had someone fly their car over from Abu Dhabi, a very special 997.2 GT2, more on that later I'm sure, and someone fly all the way over from America and rent a BMW M850i. So after we got off the ferry, we met with the entire group at a petrol station in Belgium and then put our heads down and cracked on to the first destination, which was the iconic Spa-Francorchamps. Classic Tony. Arrive at the petrol station, so you've got the t-shirts, you've got the route books, give them to the people joining us at the petrol station. What do I say? Hello everyone! I've got a t-shirt.
Mate, we're hosts.
Yeah, but the hosts with the most, you've got to give them the gear, the swag.
Right.
Spend a lot of money on this stuff.
No, we didn't.
Now, I wish I could say that we had exclusively hired out the Spa circuit for our guests to experience, but I actually think we did one better. We hired out the Spa Go-karting circuit. We learnt back in Portugal that go-karting is actually a fantastic icebreaker. Doing it early in the trip is a great way for people to bond, get to know the other people they're doing the tour with. Only thing was, as we arrived at the Spa Go-karting centre, and this was a precursor for the rest of the trip, it was pouring with rain. It's an outdoor track. So I think many of us knew what to expect, except the fact that we were going to get very wet, and we really did get very wet. But we also had a complete blast.
For people that don't do a lot of karting, the line's completely different to what it'd be in a road car or a race car. So what I'm figuring out is all the grips on the outside. But there's a couple of really fast lads here that come past me like I weren't moving, essentially. So, yeah, we'll see. I've figured it out now. I've got a couple of aces up my sleeves.
You're a dirty racer out there.
Someone's going to war.
Genuinely, go-karting in the rain, so much fun. Who knew? I mean, it's chaos. There were endless accidents. You turn the steering wheel, nothing really happens. It takes you about 20 minutes to figure out how to actually get around the lap. And then when you do, it's a checkered flag and it's all over. But genuinely, everyone had huge smiles on their faces. The fact that we all kind of got low-key pneumonia didn't really matter. Everyone thought it was a great way to kickstart things. And I could see friendships were beginning to form. So we headed back to the hotel, had a big old dinner and a few drinks to kind of really settle into the fact that the tour had begun, and got ready to do it all again the next day.
Morning. Turned into a bit of Sam now, drinking coffee. I mean, nice coffee as well. I mean, I almost search it out. So we're at Spa-Francorchamps. Right, I've pronounced that right. I'm currently watching, looks like some sighting laps. Can only be described as poo boxes, I would say. They are, look like electric smart cars. I don't know what they're doing. I mean, they've done 2 laps, so probably have to come back in now because they'll be running out of charge. We're just taking in the privets. We've got all the lovely people here having coffees and we've got a biscuit. Is that a biscuit? Whatever.
Yeah.
Now, it was actually me that suggested we headed back to Spa the next morning because I found out a load of cars were going to be testing for the 6 hours of Spa that was happening that weekend. That is a classic car event. Initially, Tony was a little skeptical, but I told him the cars and drivers taking part would be world class and it would be fantastic to get in there, check out some of the action. The organisers gave us amazing access to the pit lane and the paddock and set up this beautiful viewing area up with some great coffee and cookies as Tony just showed you, and it was well worth the stop. And I have to say, half an hour in, I even caught some excitement glinting in Tony's eyes. Usually, something like this, historic race cars, Tony's worst nightmare. These historic race cars are so good, even he's excited. You having a good time, mate?
I'm literally having the best day. Honestly, I have never ever seen so many nice cars in all my life. I literally want to stay here all day.
And I can't believe this because when I said, let's put this stop into the itinerary, Tony's like, why? I was like, no, it'd be cool, mate. We'll go check out some old cars. He's like, everyone will be bored. You genuinely are having more fun than anyone else.
Yeah,
I don't understand why.
Love it. Love it.
It's the best car, isn't it? E-Type with spotlights. Look at that, mate. I could put them on the GT3.
That's the worst car I've ever seen.
Well, now you've ruined my fun. We ended up staying at Spa for like an hour longer than we should have just because it was so amazing. But eventually we took some beautiful scenic roads over to Cologne and Motorworld, which is home of the Michael Schumacher exhibition. It's kind of like our informal lunch stop, just a good way to break up the drivers. We were heading south towards the Nürburgring. They do an amazing currywurst, quite a good schnitzel, and the cars there are always awesome. But yeah, as I mentioned, our main stop for that day was the Ring. Now, as cool as the Nürburgring is, I've always been a little bit wary of it. I mean, the Nordschleife does have a pretty big reputation for being fairly dangerous. I've done a number of laps there myself and always really enjoyed it, but never really kind of got the bug or become obsessed with going round and around and around. Unlike Tony, who is literally obsessed, so much so that about 4 months ago, he took his GT3 out there and just left it there so that he'd keep going back each weekend and just doing thousands of laps. I mean, he is a madman, but no matter how you feel, whether you're like me or like Tony, it's a bucket list destination for any petrol head. So well before the trip even began, most of our guests couldn't wait to get there. And there was a lot of and ahhing about whether they'd go out in their own cars, try and arrange taxi laps, or maybe even go for passenger laps with Tony. Well, that conversation intensified when we all realized, well, the rain wasn't really going anywhere. And when we arrived at the Ring, yeah, it was still bucketing it down. And people started to look a little bit nervous. Unbelievably, most people went, let's have a go. We came all the way here, so I was handing out passes left, right and centre, the F8 Spider, the 992 GT3s, the Clio RS200, the Golf, off they all went into the darkness, the fog, the mist, the rain to do their first ever laps around the Nordschleife. It was an unbelievable sight, and I have to applaud them because I genuinely waited a good hour and a half before I grew the balls to go out in the GT3 as well. And that must have been my 5th or 6th lap around there, maybe one of my very few laps kind of unguided. And yeah, it was in the sodding rain, which did mean it was fairly empty, but still felt like quite a lot of pressure. I have to say it was unbelievable, and the images that have come out of it have been amazing. But then right at the end, I thought I would jump in with Tony, who at that point had done about 12 or 15 passenger laps with most of the guests. We didn't really budget for Tony's M3 consumables in the trip because we didn't think he'd be doing quite so many. But yeah, I jumped in for one of his last rides, and my God, that man could do a side business of Nürburgring taxi rides. He was saying that he was just cruising, doing kind of sighter laps. He was flat out in my mind. It was quite the experience, but amazing to do. And I think everyone was absolutely buzzing off the fact that, well, we all survived. So by the time we got to the hotel that evening, there was a real fervour of what a day it had been despite the weather. And as I say, to tick off that thing on your bucket list of a lap around the Nordschleife, but also in the rain, was pretty special for most of us. Now, whilst this is officially our second trial driving tour, we always kind of thought it would be our first, or at least this route would be our first. So much so that Tony and I actually did a full recce of it this time last year. You might remember we went on a big road trip in our 2 GT3s that ended up at the Red Bull Ring in Austria. That's because we wanted to visit all the stops and locations and kind of work out whether it would actually be possible to do as a driving tour. It just so happened to be that we kind of put it on the back burner and did the Portugal trip first for a number of reasons. But one of the highlights of that kind of recce trip we did a year ago was visiting the Porsche Museum. As I already hinted at, it's never a surprise for me to be talking about Porsches on this channel. We all know I have a big affinity with them. But the Porsche Museum is fantastic, even if you don't like Porsches. I thought that maybe some of my connections, I could arrange a few special bits when we got there. However, that did raise a bit of a conundrum or problem that I wasn't aware of that we only discovered once we actually got there. Now, after the Portugal tour, we made a real big effort to say, look, we don't want to do Porsche tours. We like Porsches, we own Porsches. It's not a Porsche driving tour business. We got quite excited because obviously there are like 30 cars on this trip, only like 15 Porsches or 16 Porsches. But we've now come to the Porsche Museum and only the Porsches are allowed to park outside. Meaning that we've literally segregated our group. And basically, if you're not in a Porsche, you are having a lesser experience on this trip. It's so aggressive. Literally, Tony in his M3 has a worse version of this trip. So the long and the short of it is that we don't always want you to bring a Porsche, but if you bring a Porsche, you will have a better time. Well, whether you're a Porsche owner or not, whether you're a Porsche fan or not, and no matter where you end up parking, the museum is well worth a visit. After our stop there, we did plan to do some back road driving. Now, we weren't going to do too many back roads on this trial driving tour just because 30 plus cars is super hard to manage once you get off the main roads. But I'd done some decent driving on the 718 Spider RS international launch, which happened just south of Stuttgart, and I thought it'd be fun to try and revisit some of those locations. So off we set, and the group did get a bit split up, but there was a core group of mainly Porsches, but also the 360 Spider, what a hero for being there. A couple of the F-Types, the Alpine A110, managed to break away and get some clear runs. And boy, did we have fun, no matter how sketchy the conditions were. I think it's fair to say though, as we arrived into our hotel in Augsburg that evening, well, the weather was starting to get the better of us, and Tony and I sat down for our usual evening catch-ups and to look ahead at what was next, and we realised that there was a potential issue with our kind of final destination, which is the Fat Mankai Cafe at the top of the Grossglockner, one of my favourite mountain roads in Europe. They were expecting snow, quite a lot of snow, and there was a high chance the road was going to close before we actually got there. So we shuffled some things around and worked out that we could get there, well, the following afternoon, basically 24 hours ahead of when we were supposed to. So we made the calls, made the plans, and told everyone that actually tomorrow we'd be getting up, setting off and heading straight to the Grossglockner Strasse. Luckily, everyone was super understanding and still very excited. That excitement went through the roof when we woke up the next morning.
I woke up on Friday to what can only be described as a barrage of messages. I opened my phone up, the group's going absolutely berserk. My curtains are still drawn. Anyway, I've looked in the messages and they're all going, the sun's out, let's go, the sun's out. I'm thinking, what are they going on about? The sun's out. I opened my curtains, it's brilliant sunshine. Bearing in mind, it's poured down a rain all week. They were absolutely desperate to get on the road. They're messaging Sam, saying, Sam, can we have our passes? We want to go now. We was meant to leave at 9 a.m. Half of them had gone at 8:15 in the morning. They was gone. I mean, and they were so excited to get on that, what we would say that is the best road on the tour.
You know the bit that really got me in the feels? When we did the group photo.
Yeah.
Back at the top of the Grossglockner, a year on from the exact spot where we'd taken a photo with our two GT3s, when we did the recce for this trip.
Yeah.
When we're kind of trying to work out whether BTG tours could be a thing.
Yeah.
And then here we were a year later with 51 guests, all together. Somehow it wasn't raining.
No.
And I just stood back and thought, this is quite an achievement, isn't it?
Well, actually, to be honest, you sort of, because I didn't tell you this when I was up there, but I actually did stand back for a minute and thought, oh, this is cool.
This is really cool.
We've done well here. But I think the thing that stood out the most for me, and I said it the last time, is the people, mate. Because without the people, the trips don't happen. And I, despite what some of you may think, I'm not as grumpy as I look, and I do really enjoy meeting people from all walks of life and hearing their stories, not just their car stories, their personal stories, how they met their wives, what they do as hobbies. I just find it fascinating. So the main thing for me, always on a trip, is the people.
And genuinely enjoyed every second.
Yeah.
And I think it was at that moment that subconsciously we both knew it, and then post-fact we discussed the fact that, well, this has to become a thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this has to be a thing. We've done two, I'm going to say, very successful trials.
I would agree. I think we work very well together.
It's nice of you to say.
Well, you say it last
One person's opinion, yeah.
Everyone seemed happy, which is the main thing.
Everyone seemed very happy and asked to come back.
Yeah.
So we're like, well, you got to come back to something.
Yeah.
So watch this space. 2025, it's coming.
Yeah.
I mean, under what guise, we don't know. We're going to figure it out. We need help. We're going to be bringing somebody on to join the team, aren't we?
Absolutely need help.
Because super unrealistic to do this alone. But we think we've ironed out the formula. We've figured out what works. We've understood, I think, what people have enjoyed and maybe what they'd want to look to change. If anything, not change that much. Long story short, we're going into business.
Oh my God.
Which could be a disaster.
No, it'd be fine, mate.
So if you've watched these adventures, the one in Portugal earlier and this one now, and you thought, oh, I'd like to do that one day. Well, soon, hopefully, you'll be able to.
And you should.
And you should. So thank you all for your support. Thank you to all of you that joined us on both trials. You are, as you know, part of the Future Company family. You are our insiders, you're our guinea pigs.
Yep.
But we can't wait to grow that family and meet many more of you. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully it's a good teaser for an adventure that you're going to join us on one day. Stay tuned. We'll see you soon.